Call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Minutes?
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we have to establish who's seated here. And, well, for the public hearing, Mr. Deasy was seated.
We're on the minutes.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Well, because we're missing Mr. Dykeman, so we might want to establish who's seated.
Oh, but I haven't got to the public hearing yet. I'm just doing the regular part.
No. Well, if you don't need a
You're ahead of
alternate,
me.
if you don't need an alternate seated for the minutes, then
No.
we can wait for that.
I can say who's here.
Yeah.
Ben Philbrook, myself, David Rathman, Gardner Young, Lynn Conway, Chuck Sheehan, and Ryan Jason. Would we have a motion on the minutes, the previous meeting?
Motion to approve the minutes. Apparently, Carlene sent an amendment, and apparently Gail amended the minutes to add the word "not."
Yes.
All right. So I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Does that work?
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. Staff?
No other business here and no old business tonight. We should announce that as far as the public hearings, if anyone's here for the first one on the agenda, which is PZ 1931 SUP Eckersley LLC, Precious Place Memories Place Incorporated. The applicants have requested that hearing be continued to the February 18th meeting at the same location.
Is there enough time in that?
There is.
So now we'll start the continuation of public hearing PZ 1928ZC, Spa and JH Hospitality. I have listened to all the tapes of the last meeting, so I'm qualified to sit. And Gardner did a nice job.
Thank you very much. It wasn't the reason I was elected vice chairman.
And so at this point, yeah,
We
Mr.
will
Mr.
continue
Deasy
on.
was seated for the last hearing. And so you would replace Mr. Dykeman,
Oh, yes.
who's not
right.
here.
I'm replacing Mr. Dykeman, but Ryan is on. Right.
Good evening, Steve Parent, professional engineer with Senior Associates.
Yeah, I have to turn the mic on.
Sure, that's on.
Towards you. Working now? This one's got a power button on it. So it looks like it's on.
Yeah.
Not a problem. So good evening, Pete Parent, professional engineer with CME Associates, representing the applicant. At last month's meeting, the crux of the conversation seemed to revolve around whether this development was appropriate for the NDD design district. So we focused our responses on that, the information that we sent along. So I believe everybody should have a copy of our narrative that was included in the documents. And to add to that, I'd like to just drop off some photos.
Thanks.
So just for the benefit of the record, I'll read through what we had provided here. Basically, we went through the NDD design district and the zoning regulations and provided a response as the regulation went along. So Article 7.21.2 of the zoning regulations indicates the following. The NDD is intended to encourage the reclamation of underutilized commercial parcels and permit new construction, renovation, and/or adaptive reuses at these sites. The proposed project seeks to develop new construction on a currently vacant 4.4 acre lot, Lot 4. Lot 4 is positioned in a heavily commercially developed area with the existing Holiday Inn and Rio Salado to the north, McQuaid's Market and the Mystic Green Shopping Plaza to the east, and McDonald's and the Hyatt Place to the west. As one of only 2 remaining undeveloped parcels in the TC80 zone, this commercial property is certainly underutilized. Promote diversified housing opportunities, including, but not limited to, mixed-use development uses. While hotels are not traditional housing, they do provide residence for the transient tourist community, which helps to support the town's businesses. Section 7.21.6.5.23 specifically allows hotels as a permitted use in the NDD. The additional population provided by the proposed hotels will provide support to the existing and future mixed-use nature of the TC80 zone, and preserve and enhance the town's historic character. The applicant has made significant changes to the brand standard design of the proposed Homewood Suites to satisfy the concerns raised by the Architectural Design Review Board and provide a more colonial aesthetic to the proposed Phase 1 hotel. It is anticipated that the development of the future hotel would require similar enhancements to the typical hotel design. Maximizing development in this already heavily developed area of the town will reduce development pressure in other more historic sections. Sensitive environmental resources. The site is over 400 feet from the nearest identified wetland system and is not located in either the coastal management area or any regulated flood zone. The site does border the Denison Pequot-Seapost Nature Center property, where a vegetated buffer is provided. The applicant would like to note that the Nature Center property is also bordered by the Hyatt Place Hotel, Massonicare, the development of which facilitated the protection of the property, and a large electrical substation, which is visible from multiple areas on the Nature Center property, and these neighborhoods in the village cores. The proposed development is located in an area of town that, by design, is dependent on tourists for its continued success. The proposed design has the potential to attract hundreds of additional consumers to the neighborhood businesses and will provide them with walkable access to nearby shopping plazas and attractions. This zone is intended to allow for the establishment, continuation, and expansion of such uses and activities. The proposed development is a continuation and expansion of the existing hospitality use on the adjacent parcel and at several other parcels in the immediate vicinity, the Hyatt Place, Mystic Hilton, etc., in ways that will maintain and enhance compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods. As previously noted, the design of the proposed hotel has been reviewed and revised to be compatible with the surrounding aesthetic to the satisfaction of the Architectural Design Review Board. The project also proposes to provide sidewalk connection from Clara Drive to Coogan Boulevard along Village Farm Road to promote additional walkability between the neighborhood's various shops and attractions. Factors to be considered by the Commission in approving the NDD include Section 7.21.2.1. The proposed uses and layout are in conformity with and in furtherance of the goals and objectives contained in the POCD. The following is a summary of the multiple goals and objectives outlined in the town's POCD that are furthered by the proposed development. POCD Section 6.1.1. Strive to achieve a goal of preserving 21% of the town's land as committed open space. By focusing development energy to targeted areas of town which are already more densely developed, the town can effectively reduce the pressure to develop other parcels that are not centrally located to existing development, which can contribute to the town's 21% open space goal. POCD Section 6.3.1. Strive to create opportunities for bike paths and trails linking residential and commercial areas and between neighboring open space. The proposed sidewalk connection from Clara Drive to Coogan Boulevard will provide a connection from the commercial businesses on Coogan Boulevard to the Nature Center property and the residential neighborhoods to the south. Section 8.1.1. Seek to attract a mix of residential, retail, and service uses to address everyday village needs and tourists. The proposed development seeks to add additional tourist services to a neighborhood dependent on tourists. Section 8.2.2. maintain and improve pedestrian and bicycle access, safety, and comfort within village areas and points of interest. As previously noted, the proposed development will expand pedestrian connection to the shops and attractions along Coogan Boulevard via a new sidewalk along Village Farm Road. Also, the proposed development does not propose any new curb cuts, reducing potential for vehicle-pedestrian conflicts. Section 10.1.1, encourage appropriate economic development. As indicated in Section 10.2 of the POCD, high-value development with minimal negative impact, especially in the area of the town's 3 highway interchanges, is encouraged. The proposed development was previously presented and favorably viewed by the town's Economic Development Commission. The proposed development seeks to minimize negative impacts while maximizing the potential of a vacant parcel in an already heavily developed section of town adjacent to Exit 90. Zoning Section 7.21.22, harmony and compatibility with surrounding residential neighborhoods.
Sorry, somehow the mic just cut out on you.
Section 7.21.2.2, harmony and compatibility with surrounding residential neighborhoods. The existing TC80 zone abuts residential RM15 and RA40 zones to the south. There are 2 parcels that directly abut the existing TC80 zone. The Denison Pequot Seapost Nature Center property, which includes the historic farmhouse and plus or minus 34 acres of federally protected land, and the senior living at Massonicare property. As previously noted, the Nature Center property currently abuts property is used for hospitality and other commercial uses. The Massonicare facility and all multifamily apartment-type uses function very similarly to hotels. Hotels are generally residential uses. People leave in the morning to visit attractions or go to work and return at night to sleep. Hotels simply have a more transient population with a greater measurable impact on the tourism-based economy of this area of town. Land uses in the village cores. The proposed hotels are an expansion of existing use on the adjacent property, and the residents of the hotels provide necessary additional population to support the various shops, restaurants, and attractions in the immediate area, including adequate buffers that are consistent with the existing condition of the site, neighborhood, and/or village core. The proposed buffer to the residentially zoned property to the south is consistent with the required 25-foot side yard requirement for the standard TC80 zone. The reduced or eliminated buffers adjacent to the abutting commercial properties are consistent with the development seen in the old Mystic Village Plaza. The current zoning requirements for vegetated buffers in between adjacent commercial parcels create standalone uses that are less likely to be able to share parking and promote walkability. Promotion of pedestrian safety. The proposed development includes the addition of a sidewalk connection from Coogan Boulevard to Clara Drive along Village Farm Road, as well as a network of internal sidewalks to allow for unrestricted pedestrian movement in and around the site. Provision for adequate parking. The proposed development provides the quantity of parking spaces as required by the town's zoning regulations. Minimized impact of motor vehicles. Based on review and comment by the town's Board of Police Commissioners and the applicant's traffic engineers, motorists will be encouraged to utilize Clara Drive and its signalized intersection with Coogan Boulevard to access the proposed development. Improvements are also included at the intersection of Village Farm Road and Coogan Boulevard to formalize the existing right turn only restriction and to notify vehicles traveling along Coogan Boulevard of the reduced sightline condition that exists there. Also, as previously noted, the proposed development does not include any new curb cuts. And prevention of glare to adjacent properties from lighting on site. As required by the town's regulations, all proposed site lights are full cutoff fixtures. The proposed development includes typical surface treatments that do not exhibit a high degree of reflectance. To the extent practicable, commercial traffic shall be directed to major thoroughfares and away from residential streets. As noted above, the proposed development will primarily use Clara Drive for access to Coogan Boulevard. Clara Drive, an existing town road with a number of existing commercial uses along it. The site's location within the existing heavily developed TC80 zone eliminates the need for any traffic on residential roadways. Section 7.21.2.3, furtherance of the goals, standards, and policies of the Connecticut Coastal Area Management Act. The proposed development is outside of the coastal management area. Thank you for bearing with me. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to ask.
Sorry, this is Ryan. I'm just curious if you made any changes to your site plan. I know the Nature Center had some serious concerns about how close the proposed hotel was going to be, the lighting and buffer. I know you partly addressed those by this narrative. Just wondering if there are any specific changes that have been made.
We have not made any changes to the plan as of yet. We did have a discussion with the Nature Center about a potential modification to increase the buffer to 40 feet. But it would require eliminating this row of parking, which would make us non-compliant with the town's zoning regulations for parking, but I feel it would provide us with sufficient parking for the uses in a realistic scenario where you have 3 hotels sharing a parking lot. You know, the parking regulations are based on every single one of those hotel rooms being full
fully.
and having all the employees and the restaurant also functioning at full capacity at the same time. So, I mean, I think reducing this parking to improve the buffer would certainly be an adequate, you know, something that we could consider as a trade-off. But because the crux of the conversation was whether this parcel was appropriate for the NDD,
Right.
we didn't go through and make design changes to the site plan aspect of it before the
Okay.
zone change was.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
No. Towards you.
Okay, I got it. Can you hear me now? Okay. So you provided us with these pictures, and I think during the last meeting we asked for renderings of the new proposed building from various aspects. Have you provided that at all?
We have not provided renderings of the parcel. We spoke with the applicant about providing those. We discussed it with the architect, and the feeling was is that they didn't want to spend the fees to have those developed, thinking that that was more of a site plan option. What's illustrated here is that from 100 feet away on the Dennison property, the existing Holiday Inn essentially disappears based on topography and existing vegetation. But you can see Massonicare and McQuaid's and the substation from various spots along the property at greater distances than where the existing hotel disappears.
Right, but the new structure will be taller.
Approximately
Then-
10 feet, yes.
Right, and it will be behind.
Correct.
Right, so it'll be longer, okay. And then I noticed in your response to some of the points, one of the things that you mentioned was the lighting, which there was a lot of discussion and conversation about the lighting in the last meeting, and concern about it. And you say that you use typical surface, which will include typical surface treatments that do not exhibit a high degree of reflectance. Did you look at anything that may be atypical to address the concern?
Well, the discussion that we were having here is that we're meeting the requirements of no light spill beyond the property line, and we're not providing a high reflective facade. It is not a metal facade or anything that's going to reflect light out from the site. So essentially, the effect at the property line should be 0 based on the lighting calculations.
Okay, thank you.
Am I on? Am I on now?
No. Yes.
Now I'm on. Just so I under, for point of reference, this is the back of the existing Holiday Inn.
Correct.
The Homewood will be over here someplace?
Correct. The Homewood will be slightly to the left, and the future hotel will be slightly to the right. They're kind of centered on the Holiday Inn.
Based on this picture, the home would be over here someplace.
That picture was taken standing here and looking this way. So you're looking at
Okay,
the Holiday Inn on a
the home would be
skew.
off to the-
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just
So a
wanted to get oriented.
So a four-story building would be certainly visible in this photo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the the discussion we're trying to make here is that
Didn't want to include.
from the property line, without any buffering, certainly visible. We're proposing a 20-foot buffer, and from 100 feet into the site, you can't see the existing hotel, so you may see the peak of the roof on the future hotel, but it's similar to what you can see of the existing commercial developments that surround the parcel.
Any other questions this time? Chuck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you just explain on the map what the buffer would look like without the zone change?
So the TC80 requires a 50-foot buffer and a 100-foot setback in its standard form. It has special regulations for hotels. So 50 feet. Puts us at about the back of the parking row
On the
on this
side?
side. And the side would be 25 feet. So that would put us, again, at basically the back of the parking row here, a little bit into the drive. You know, we got a 6-foot sidewalk here, 24-foot drive, and we're a few feet off of the property line as, so we'd be in that driveway on this side. This side, I believe we're at our narrowest point here, we have a 15-foot, so we'd be about halfway into the parking spot on this
It's a
side.
30-foot buffer? What is it?
I believe it's 25.
25.
So it looks like there's a 100-foot buffer. If you're in the TC80 zone, when you abut a residence or residential zone, which the nature center is. So it looks like it'd be a 100-foot buffer from the nature center side.
Okay.
So it's going from 100 foot to what you proposed is actually what?
It's 24 feet to the back of curb.
I should say 100 feet with 50 feet of screening for the TC80 zone.
Right. So I believe it's a 100-foot setback to the building, correct, Keith? And the 50 feet is vegetated?
Right, or 100 feet to, 100 feet has to be a buffer. So it doesn't have to be screened necessarily, but it couldn't be the parking lot
Okay.
either.
So essentially that would take out the access to Clara Drive.
Yes, but I believe there's a provision where the access could extend into the buffer.
Yeah, there's another section that says the buffer requirement, 50 feet with 25 feet of screening except in front yard. So sometimes these zoning regulations have these different standards that contradict each other a little bit. But it does make sense that a property, there has to be an exit to a property, so
So it would not preclude access.
I don't think so in this case.
Okay, but suffice to say that the buffer, if the zone change didn't take place, the buffer would displace all the parking and all of, or most of the access drive along the southerly side of the property, other than the necessity of getting onto Clara Drive, is that correct?
Correct.
So if the zone change did not change, you could put one hotel rather than two, correct?
We did preliminary plans where one hotel appeared to fit within the confines of the
Confines
TCA.
of the- Okay.
Okay, so I think that's a significant issue. I'm not really sure this addresses a rationale for reducing the buffer next to a piece of property that's used for conservation purposes. I haven't seen any rationale that would support reducing the buffer, changing the zone to reduce the buffer next to really a nature conservancy. We've talked about traffic limitations in Village Farm Road, the intersection. Have you approached OSTA at all or CONDOT with regard to that intersection and examined the intersection to see if it meets any of the warrants for a traffic signal?
We have not spoken with CONDOT or OSTA specifically, but we have reviewed the traffic data that was prepared by our traffic engineer. And basically, the gist of the requirements, sight line isn't a warrant for a traffic signal. It's got to be turns and traffic. So Village Farm Road doesn't have the traffic capacity to warrant a signal, basically.
Even with all of the traffic that's generated in all of these marketplaces?
Well, so that's one of the things that we're looking at is trying to drive everybody down to Clare where there already is a signal.
Is there any rationale for the split, of you know, based on an origin and destination survey or anything like that? Do we have a traffic study?
We have a traffic study, yes.
Then what is the split between Clara Drive and Village Farm Road?
I believe they did an 80-20 split.
I'd be interested to, and I know POSTA always takes place after planning and zoning, but I'd be interested in OSTA's analysis there. In terms of stormwater discharge, I looked at the town engineer's comments, and he had some comments about the HydroCAD output and the discharges being zeroed out.
Correct.
Could you explain how this system works, and does it actually provide detention for a 100-year storm?
Let's see. Well, so the drainage system collects various catch basins along the property and discharges to one large underground detention system. The detention system is metered at this structure to filter out a small low flow orifice, high level overflow, and then that system discharges to an extension of the Village Farm drainage system. So this system does provide detention of peak flows through the 100-year storm. In my response to Mr. DeLuca's comments, I did provide an updated HydroCAD that showed that if you increase this pipe to a 15-inch, the way that HydroCAD calculates those flows, it's looking at headwater versus tailwater, and it's seeing, okay, well, when I'm looking at my peak flow, I've got 0 because I've got all this head here. But if I bump this pipe up to a 15-inch, the discharge pipe, it doesn't negatively impact the peak discharge aspect. So I'm still attenuating peak flows, and it does give you flow through all those orifices in the HydroCAD account.
Overcomes the tailwaters.
Correct.
Did the town engineer comment on that, revise?
I don't believe Mr. DeLuca had time to review that and respond.
Okay, because I mean, it's critical that works and that the town engineer signs off on that. We don't really know that at this point. The town engineer hasn't had an opportunity. He had a comment that there was an issue with HydroCAD. I agree with what the town engineer says, but we don't really know if the town engineer has analyzed this. So I think we need that feedback from the town engineer on the revised plan. I don't know if we have time to get that.
When were the revised plans?
Actually, that was a question.
Okay,
And I have other questions.
go right ahead.
Well, for the hearing to be kept open longer, to get that, it would just need an extension from the applicant to get there.
Last question I have is with regard to wastewater discharge, and that is that there's a restriction on discharging from the WPCA. You're aware of that you can't connect to the sanitary sewer system.
Correct. There's currently a moratorium on the connection.
Okay. So at what point do you plan on proceeding with this project?
Our understanding with conversations with WPCA was that that moratorium would be handled and lifted within the next year to year and a half. This is obviously an 18-month construction project to begin with, never mind the permitting hurdles that still exist even after we go to you folks. We have to go to OSTA and proceed that way.
Do we have any feedback from WPCA on this?
No more concrete time frame than that. I always hear it's about a year or so.
So again, we're approving, or we're being asked to approve a zone change in an area that couldn't handle one hotel. But we're going to consider 2 that's going to intensify the discharge to the wastewater system that can't handle any more now. So without any feedback from WPCA. So again, I think that's a critical issue for the zone change. That WPCA commented on the fact that there are improvements underway that are going to create capacity for this project, and perhaps even comment on whether they can accommodate the increased intensity of 2 hotels at this point. We don't have that feedback, and I don't see how we could consider a zone change that intensifies the use without that feedback from WPCA. So I think the issues of the buffer next to a conservancy with really no additional justification in your response to our concerns about changing the zone. The wastewater issues, the traffic issues, I don't think we can, guess at what OSTA is the replacement for the State Traffic Commission. It hasn't acted yet, it never acts on projects until after we approve them. And the stormwater management issues, which our town engineer has not really had a chance to review and comment on. And the town engineer's comments were negative. I think those are all issues which deal with the increased intensity that's caused by the zone change, and I don't know how we could act without additional information. That's my question.
Ben? You got any questions?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Any other questions this time? No? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get the sign-up sheet.
Yeah. At this time, in the back table. At this time, we'll hear from anyone else, anyone in favor of this project. Then we'll hear from anyone opposed to this project, and then any general comments, and then the applicant will have a right for rebuttal. There is a sign-up sheet in the rear. If you would sign, please. Is this tonight's down here?
Yeah.
What's this name? DevNet, there's no one signed up in favor. We're going to those opposed. DevNet, say Schaefer? Hope I got it right. I'll try.
Not an easy one to get. Okay, thank you. I did want to make some comments, a few brief comments with new information that we received since last month's meeting. As we mentioned at that meeting, Coogan Farm is in a federal conservation easement, which, and as such, has both state and federal involvement through the Connecticut DEEP and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And in the past month, we did reach out to our contacts in both agencies to get their feedback on the proposed plan and see if there was any kind of feedback that we could give. They did remind us that the property was deemed important enough to be included in a comprehensive $1 million grant project through the North American Wetlands Conservation Act for the purposes of protecting and restoring habitat for migratory waterfowl and associated species. And a review of the grant, which I brought today, and I would like to just mention a few of the things, the reasons why it's protected, because it was commented on that it's not in a wetlands area. This project is part of the Connecticut Coastal Initiative, and it comprised two separate components. One is a restoration component, and the other is an acquisition. And Coogan Farm was given the grant for the acquisition component. It notes that both components of the proposed project result in progress towards achievement in the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, Partners in Flight, U.S. Shorebird Conservation Plan, and North American Waterbird Conservation Plan population objectives for a number of priority species. All the tracts, which includes the Coogan Farm, associated with this project fall within the National Priority Wetlands Area, the U.S. Shorebird Conservation Plan, and the North American Waterbird Conservation Plan. Additionally, all tracts lie within the Atlantic Coast Joint Venture and waterfowl focus areas. All tracts are also within the boundaries of the Long Island Sound Study, and this project brings 4 new partners to this grant to strengthen the conservation community in the state of Connecticut by bringing together a diverse group of partners with a common objective. As I mentioned at the last meeting, this provides critical protection for 2 watersheds that protect the water quality in the Mystic River. And the land is important to high priority land birds. And the track is also located within the Ledyard New England Cottontail Focus Area. And it's an area designated for the recovery of the candidate endangered species, the New England Cottontail, with the goal of preventing the species from being listed as endangered. It also notes that the north-south ridgeline, which extends for nearly a half a mile parallel to the river, is important for migratory birds, especially raptors. Last month, we raised these concerns at the meeting, and really we requested clarification on 2 points, some of which have been brought up here today. They include the potential elimination of the buffer and the height of the buildings. We did receive an email shortly after that meeting, and the representative noted that they would provide us with renderings from multiple view locations that were mentioned at that meeting. We never received any new elevations, and I don't believe that they were provided to the town either. He also did note that there wasn't, which he noted here tonight, that there wasn't too much he could do to improve the buffer without removing the parking spaces, which had already been stipulated by the police commission. So that's not for us to decide as a way to improve the buffer there. He also commented on some of the regulations and the stipulations as to what it would require to be approved as an NDD zone. I will also reiterate those because I think, what is in this grant and the reason why this land is in a federal conservation easement speaks more truly to the intent of that. And that is that it is intended to preserve and enhance the town's historic character and sensitive environmental resources. There is very few places that get a designation in a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Conservation easement. And it also is intended to provide harmony and compatibility with surrounding residential neighborhoods, land uses, and village cores, including adequate buffers that are consistent with the existing conditions on the site. The trail that was proposed to be put into the Coogan Farm property does not negate that. We were not consulted on that trail going in. We already have a trail going directly to the corner of Masonicare where there's adequate parking that they have provided for us, and we worked closely with our neighbors to put that trail in a position that everybody approved. So that would just break up the property more by including that there. It was also noted about the TC80 zone. We recognize that this is commercially zoned. We recognize that in TC80 they can still have a hotel. We're not arguing that, but we feel that this plan as presented does not appear to meet the standards for a zoning change to the NDD zone, and it would significantly negatively impact the Coogan Farm. We don't feel that our concerns regarding this have been adequately addressed. And because of this, and due to the highly sensitive nature of our property, the neighboring property, we really feel that this zoning change should be rejected, and the minimum required buffer for the current TC80 zone should be maintained and enforced if we retain the TC80 zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephen Dodd. Stephen?
Thanks. Stephen Dodd, 59 Walcott Avenue in Stonington. I spoke last time, but I had follow-ups. I indicated clearly last time I was opposed to the NDD zone change. I know those comments are all on the record, so I won't repeat that part of it. January, I had some follow-up, which included contacting resources for advice on site design considerations to make sure that we were adequately protecting the property that we essentially act as stewards for the Fed and the state. I did speak with the Trust for Public Land, who are experts in the area. They helped advise us on the original acquisition. They had a number of comments, but they suggested that we go to an expert of theirs, Kelly Bowling. He's in their Boston office. I spoke with Kelly. He made a number of suggestions that were then sent to me in an email. I'm happy to share. The context of this, well, I did share the plan with him, explained the request for the NDD designation, which he also thought that was inappropriate for the area, given the buffer requirements that the site should demand at that common border. I'm happy to share those, but in summary, and I will provide copies if you'd like now, or I can do it after I go through it. Would you like me to hand them out now?
Sure. Can take that. Thanks.
Kelly effectively explained that the buffer needs to be as substantial as possible in the area. He had more significant concerns and I think more significant changes that he would suggest that I am not advocating. I just would like to let you know, I think it's important to understand how sensitive they, at Trust for Public Land, understanding that they work very often with the Fed and state, how they would look at this property given its close proximity. They'd even go so far as to concentrate the structures on the northerly part of the property to get them further away from, as far as possible from the Coogan site, the DPNC site. Talked about the taller structures, and they would hope that if there is a gradual decline in elevation, that those structures would be clustered on the northern side, so that you essentially drop that height as low as possible. Also talked about clustering the vehicular infrastructure away from the property. The bioswales to manage stormwater is another. The water's not running our way. We understand that. Consolidating required setbacks. Exterior lighting fully shielded and focused on the adjacent grade. This goes further than what's been suggested here is adequate, so that ambient light pollution doesn't carry off site. In a follow-up conversation I had with Chad Frost at the suggestion of Kelly Bowling, Chad worked with us on the design of the site originally. He also said you have to be careful of the light studies and make sure they're done in such a way that there also isn't horizontal light and other light penetrating. So that is a spotlight on a building, something that may be used to light up an area that might be in the parking can very often be angled inappropriately. He also mentioned concern about had we look carefully, anyone look carefully at the proposed lighting on the top of the building. Opaque fencing to catch headlights. They're from vehicular traffic. We did talk about the elevation drop. There's a wall proposed. If the buffer was adequate, you could actually use a hill, still have roughly what they're proposing, which is a 10-foot high buffer, but it would be gentle, but the point with it is you'd still be able to deflect some of the traffic headlight issues that otherwise would be a problem. We do have the benefit of the drop. We talked a bit about he sent this to me. We then talked a little bit about that proposed trail. That entry point originally in August of 19 was proposed when we first saw the drawings, but it was only at the request of I believe the current owner, who is I was just explaining to me today, clarified for me, is the son of the owner, of the original owner who has passed away. But Babu met with us. We asked a number of questions. He couldn't answer them, including why the sidewalk was there. There had been no discussion. We were told at the time the town required it. We questioned that, and I did follow up with Keith and asked the question just recently to say, geez, this never been answered. Apparently, it helps with an NDD designation, but is not required. That's not what we were told. We sort of thought, for some reason, the town had stuck us with an entrance we did not want because of fragmentation concerns, that is a walkway. We do have an adequate walkway down below. We worked out, as Davnet spoke about, with Masonic Care, who worked very collaboratively, with Mike McQuaid, who was worked a long time with us on that. We located in a position everybody was satisfied with, and also were gifted some parking spots down there, so it didn't take away from Mike's parking, which he was concerned about for good reason. So the point with that, I think that's relevant with Peter's comments is the discussions about the abutters, and that effectively sort of the current situation has abutters who already might penetrate the visible border and add lighting and other things, add light penetration. In fact, the developments that are there were pre-existing for the most part. Masonic Care was essentially concurrently developed. The sequence was is irrelevant. They worked very closely with us. Masonic Care was extraordinarily sensitive to not impacting the property all the way along. I personally was probably at a dozen meetings with them. They designed it collaboratively, minimized visual impact, virtually no lighting impact, noise. Again, ultimately collaborated on an entry point down below and one in another corner that heads to the east. I don't think it's reasonable or fair to say also that the views right now from important parts of Coogan that buildings are in those view lines. That's not accurate. From the farmhouse, the educational barn, the Giving Garden below, the Ham Pavilion, and as a matter of fact, the primary field that we have, none of those buildings are visible even in the winter. Certainly there's probably some light penetration on a dark winter night, but those buildings do not come up and over the tree lines. That's an inaccurate, not that Peter inaccurately represented it, but I just wanted to make sure that's not the case. Those do not rise up above. So it would be new. These buildings are closer in the proposal and tall. 55 feet is the proposed building, and 50 feet is the Holiday Inn at a lower elevation, but nevertheless, we don't know what it'll look like. We're not saying we're opposed to it. We just don't know what it looks like, and had asked for renderings so we could talk intelligently about that. The other points I think Davnet has covered adequately, and so I don't think there's anything else I need to add on that. So that would.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Carleen?
I guess it doesn't move. For the record, my name is Carleen Donarumo. This application has been very troubling since day one. First, there is the question of whether or not it deserves an NDD rezone. It was this applicant that paid for a zone change to include the TC80 zone eligibility for this NDD in May of 2018. Unfortunately, the Planning and Zoning Commission at that time approved it. To me, that was a big mistake. At the last public hearing in January on this current application, there was lots of testimony that it did not meet the definition of NDD. Please don't forget that. When the NDD zone was enacted, it was envisioned to be used on places like the Granary in downtown Pawcatuck, or the mills in downtown Pawcatuck on Mechanic Street that no longer produced batteries and printing presses and parking lots that were no longer needed. In no way was it the intent for property that was vacant and not producing any money for the owner. In its narrative, which the applicant read tonight to you to justify their thinking on the NDD designation, he overlooks a very key word in eligibility. The word is reclamation, which implies by definition that something existed on the property and therefore is replaced. A treed lot does not count. The proposal clearly is not promoting diversified housing opportunities, and it is clearly not in the village cores as required. The statement that, quote, the proposed development is a continuation and expansion of the existing holiday use admits that it does not meet the definition of an NDD. And to liken hotels to residences, to me, is a very big stretch. Please keep in mind, as has been stated tonight, that in the TC zone, TC 80 zone, does allow the building of a hotel. The other troubling problem with this application is that critical information that is always provided by other applicants at the time of their public hearing, this applicant has not provided. It is not sufficient, and if I don't know what you've got as information from the Department of Planning, but when I looked at it today, there was a letter in there, and then if you read through it, it kept saying, acknowledged, acknowledged. We know that, we know that. Well, it's supposed to be on the plan, not say, yeah, I know, at some future time I'm going to give it to you. So it has to be part of the record, has to be on the application, on the site plans. The town and other outside reviewing agencies need data in order to properly review the project, especially one as large as this one. That means the DOT, the Aquarian Water Company, the DEEP, the Water Pollution Control Authority, the Fire Department. They all need critical, important data to feed back to you to make an intelligent decision. In my humble opinion, this is the worst application I have seen in all my years of following planning and zoning. It not only deserves to be denied on the basis that it does not qualify for an NDD, but also on the grounds that it is grossly incomplete. We need complete and accurate information for you to make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Opposed? A general comment? Yes. Opposed or general comments?
General comments.
Okay. Go ahead, June.
I didn't sign the sheet. I'm June Strunk. I live at 45 New London Turnpike. I'm your second selectman. I'm not speaking for or against, but I do have some comments with respect to some of the things that Mr. Sheehan had said regarding WPCA and the town engineer that might shed some light. So WPCA has two projects that are going on, and this is why they have this moratorium. One is the Mystic plant is at capacity. So it's not adding capacity at the Mystic plant, it's diverting capacity to the Stonington plant, which is a 2-year project. And then in conjunction with that, they're doing an I&I study, which is looking at the stormwater intrusion and infiltration to see how much just stormwater that they're treating. Those are the two things that were required before any additional building permits could be could be granted. So I don't know if it's a year, or if it's 18 months, or it's 2 years, or even if the money that's currently in the budget to fund it is sufficient. And then, so I think it's important to get some comments from WPCA regarding their timeline. And then the other thing is the town engineer. The town is currently seeking a town engineer because Mr. Gilletta took a very nice opportunity elsewhere. So it'll be a while, I think, before we can actually get comments from the town engineer. But I think looking at runoff is important in making sure that, the town engineer, because we're looking at permeability of surfaces and not just 100-year storms, like, 200-year storms. So I think those comments were just valid. So
Thank you, June.
okay.
General comments, Ben Tamsky.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I was here a couple months ago to speak the last time you had a request for a zone change and to a floating zone. And unfortunately, I came to the meeting after the public comments had been closed. I think you may remember that meeting.
Yeah.
So if you'll indulge me, I just want to briefly read a little bit that I had planned to read that night, just a couple of lines that I think are appropriate tonight. First, and again, this was a couple months ago, I'd like to welcome the two most recently appointed permanent members, Lynn Conway and Fred Dykeman at that time. I am particularly pleased that Lynn and Fred have been seated, as you both come from long backgrounds serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now at least three members of this board have that experience to draw upon. As you know, the Zoning Board of Appeals is probably as close as you can get to preventing and in some cases settling disagreements between neighboring property owners. The experience should serve you well in voting on the application before you tonight. An application for a zone change has the potential for the most profound consequences of almost any application that you can decide. You are put in the position to choose winners and losers. If the request is granted, certainly the value of the applicant's property will rise, but it is just as certain that the value of some of the neighboring properties will be devalued. By creating a new, more intensive zone abutting a residential zone, you will almost certainly be creating new disputes where none existed previously. Going back to experience gained from the ZBA, the biggest enforcement issues arise when commercial zones border residential zones. I hope that you will give this application and the concerns of the neighboring property owners very serious consideration before jumping to a hasty vote. And so that's from the last request for a zone change. With regard to tonight's application, I just want to draw your attention to the first page of the staff report. Very simple application status. And if you go about halfway down, it says tonight's public hearing is day 28 of 35, which means that if you don't have an extension, you probably will close the public hearing tonight. Next item says that you have 65 days to render a decision. And that's there for a reason, and I hope that you will use a good portion of that 65 days. And certainly at least to get, on a zone change application, it's so important. I think you should have 5 permanent members voting. And I think that by delaying a vote until Mr. Dykeman is available, I'm sure you can listen to the tape of tonight's meeting. I think it's appropriate, and myself and 2 other of the past chairmen of this board have spoken about this and always agreed that a zone change should require votes of 5 permanent members. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Like rebuttal? I'll be waiting. Nice meeting.
I only have a couple minor things to add. In regards to the trail, that was a discussion we had with previous town staff when we first envisioned this project almost 2 years ago. Hey, what would a nice amenity be? Something that we could do, and that was a suggestion. And Mr. Moore may have construed that as a requirement. It was not. It was always just a suggestion. And in my latest email with the folks from the Nature Center, I did say, hey, if you don't want the trail connection there, is there something else we can do? Signage to direct people to the Masonic Air, that sort of thing. And that's something we certainly would be willing to do, is improve the Calero Drive sidewalk and provide wayfinding signage and that sort of thing. In regards to Carlene's comments, I take exception to the fact that this application is grossly inadequate, but I won't go into detail with that. Thank you.
Any questions of the applicant?
Yes, I do have one more question. I think at our last meeting, did you ask for a night sky rendering of the site, and from different locations, I thought, correct?
I did, and that's why I asked the question earlier, whether there were any additional renderings,
Well, I didn't hear you say night sky specifically,
Right.
but, so that was never provided?
But he said none,
Okay.
so.
No, the applicant made a choice not to have their architect prepare any renderings.
Okay. I just didn't hear the night sky one. Thank you.
Thank you.
All set.
Okay. Is the staff?
So once the hearing's closed, there's a few different specific votes on this application. One is a decision on the waivers requested, which was the municipal fiscal impact analysis and cultural, aesthetic, or heritage analysis. Also a decision on conformance with the plan of conservation and development in the comprehensive plan. A decision on the master plan, which is the same as the zone change application to the NDD, and also a decision on the site plan application, which was the more detailed plan, which would essentially allow construction of the Phase 1 hotel, the hotel to the left on the plan there. As was stated earlier, if the commission wants to keep the hearing open, it can only be done with the permission of the applicant, because we're essentially at the last day that we can do that. If the hearing's closed, you've got 65 days to make a decision. And, the staff report is a draft motion to approve, because we always have to be ready for a commission that likes something and wants to approve it. If there are issues you have with the application, we can have a motion that goes the other way, if that's what you're looking for.
Anything else, Keith?
No, we really didn't receive new comments since the last hearing. I did read Aquarian Waters' comments at the last hearing. As Mr. Sheehan said, we didn't get comments back from our engineering consultant yet on the information that was submitted. And if the commission does want to approve the application, there are 12 recommended stipulations that address some of these issues on page 31 of the staff report. I won't read them all now unless you want me to, but one of the main ones is that if this is approved, that a stipulation is that the second hotel comes back as another master plan amendment, because we haven't seen any sort of renderings of the second hotel at all. And that's usually part of a master plan amendment. A master plan application is to have a general sense of what the building looks like. And that hasn't gone to the architectural review board yet.
Thank you. If we're going to close the public hearing, I think we'll be able to. Chuck, this would be your last.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If we're going to be closing the public hearing, it's your last chance to have any questions. You can't talk when we go into discussion.
Right, I understand that. I appreciate
Do you have
that.
any feelings?
I want to give the applicant an opportunity to rebut anything I said. I think I've raised the issues, that I wanted to raise that I think are fairly significant. We don't have a condition where we can allow the wastewater discharge that we heard tonight from the second selectman. Appreciate her being here to at least provide some feedback that could go on for 2 years. That's with any discharge, not discharge from 2 hotels. We don't have the town engineer's feedback on the review of the HydroCAD output, and the comments that we do have clue us that there are issues. I have no reason to disbelieve what you say, and I'm sure you're probably right that changing the outlet pipe to a 15-inch relieves the system and relieves the outlet control, and it works fine. But we have to hear that from the town engineer, not from me. So there's questions on the stormwater drainage. The traffic situation is inadequate in many people's eyes for what exists there now, never mind expanding it with the issues here. We always have to consider traffic on zone changes. And we have no justification for reducing the buffer next to a nature conservancy that has both local, federal, and state significance in a variety of different variety of different regulations. And I think that's perhaps something that is an oversight in the response from the developer there, that they did not provide us with some justifications for why we could consider reducing the buffer. And this zone change dramatically reduces the buffer. So there's no feedback on that. Thank you for the opportunity
Thank you.
to state those. I think those are all significant issues that should be taken into consideration. I, probably fortuitously for you, cannot vote on this application or comment further on it, but those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. You want to vote on, do I hear a motion on this application? Remember, we always vote to approve, and then we can deny the approval, rather than have it denied. Remember how we got things mixed up once? We were in trouble. Okay. Ben? We like to have the motion to approve, and then we can deny an approval application rather than have a motion to deny, and we get all screwed up with what we're doing. Do I hear a motion on this application?
David, would it be appropriate to discuss whether we should wait
Well,
65 days or whether you want permanent,
well, I will be away next meeting. I'll be out of the country. So I won't be here back until March. And I know other members at this time of year are come and go. So I think we should be able to, Fred's not here, but I don't know who, I won't be here the next one. So I think I'm confident the five of us can decide it tonight.
okay?
We do know Fred's feeling on it.
Okay. I'm just saying that 65 days is over 2 months.
I know that.
So
We can
brings
wait,
you
or,
to-
I mean, I don't think there's any need to wait. Do I hear a motion?
So you want us to get the ball rolling.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve this project as presented with the stipulations in the staff report.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion.
This is Ryan. I don't think that the applicant has met the requirements to have that zone change. I think they gave us, in all fairness, gave us an interpretation of what they thought, but I didn't see any new information that would make me think that they have altered their plan to meet the requirements and have the zoning change approved, with it as it is right now. I think there are too many major concerns with the surrounding properties, and I don't see that they've met their burden of proof proof to make me think we could approve this, so.
Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think that the application is complete. I don't think that it meets the requirements of the zone change with the information available.
Gardner? Ben?
I don't think it meets the burden of the statement of purpose for the NDD, section 7.21.2. All the narratives are extremely weak and don't even come up to the proper wordage. So I don't even see how we can get our foot in the door.
Yeah. I agree with everyone. I agree with Colleen Donnarumma. This was not intended for this type of property. It was intended for Pawcatuck, and we're trying to rehab, not take a vacant field and try to fill it up. So, all those in favor of this application, say aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed. You opposed?
I said aye.
Okay. Application defeated unanimously.
We do have the specific votes here, you know, the,
Want to go by one by one?
Want to go one by one?
yeah, I think that would,
I'll take it. Ben?
You want-
Pacific Road, they want you.
So let's go, want to do the waivers first?
yeah, I've got them here.
Which, the whereas and
Oh,
accordance? Where are you?
I'm sorry, this stuff here.
That's right, okay. So the first item will be a decision on the waivers requested, which are municipal fiscal impact analysis, cultural aesthetic, and/or heritage analysis.
Do I hear a vote on this, of this motion? Second? Do I have a second on it?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Wait a minute.
Vote to deny, or?
We said,
This is a decision on the waivers.
on decision on the waivers.
Yeah, you know, it would have to be in the form of a motion to approve or deny
Yeah,
the
that's
waiver
what I thought.
requests.
I make a motion to approve the decision on the waivers requested.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of it?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Number two, a decision on conformance with the Plan of Conservation and Development and Comprehensive Plan.
Do I hear second to this motion?
Second.
Discussion?
I don't think it meets the Plan of Conservation and Development.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
Number three, a decision on the master plan / zone change application.
We have voted on that once. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
And the number four, decision on the site plan application, which will be for Phase 1.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
That's it?
That's it.
Thank you.
Does that satisfy you?
You can build one hotel. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?